Another voice of this conversation. We're joined now by Lyal, who is a human rights expert. He's visiting professor at the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law, joining us now from Rome. Lyal, as always, we appreciate you taking your time out to join us and to give us your insight. What are your thoughts, Lyal, about the human rights of even ISIS fighters and their family members? Of course, we're talking about the context of the UK, but we can talk about any respective country, of course, of whom the nationals, these ISIS members and their family members may be.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good question, and it's that human rights are most important to be protected and promoted where their people are most unpopular, because that's where we need to have human rights guarded most carefully. And the reason is simple, and that is that when we're talking about ISIS fighters or any other terrorist who incurs the wrath of the people and majority opinion, or likewise for extreme political dissidents in some cases, etc. You need to have those basic protections, and that's what human rights is all about. So that human rights guarantee the basic rights of the individual against the power of the state and even non-state actors. So when we're talking about ISIS fighters, of course, people are understandably and correctly angered about them, but it's in those times when politicians and people may not want to respect their rights, and that there's a risk that those rights will be trampled over roughshod. And in this case of ISIS foreign fighters, yeah. I think it's correct to say that the government has come up with a lot of excuses to evade its responsibility and to prosecute on according to the grounds of nationality when we're talking about British nationals.
Mm. Okay, so Lily, one of the issues that has also been brought up in concern in regarding, this entire issue of repatriation of ISIS fighters to their home countries, be it the UK or otherwise, is that if they remain for much longer within those camps or within those detention centers where they are, again, surrounded essentially by the same kinds of people with the same kinds of ideology, that actually this will give a resurgence to Daesh 2.0 or ISIS 2.0. Is that a legitimate concern?
That is indeed a legitimate concern. We saw that happen in Iraq, in Iraqi prisons, which is, one of the birthplaces of the Islamic State, in fact, were the Iraqi prisons. I would like to clarify something here. I'm not comparing ISIS to the British military or indeed any military. I work for Iraq Body Count, and I know very well the crimes that ISIS are committing in Iraq. I know that this year alone, they've killed over 1,000 people. 1,000 civilians. So I know what they do. What I'm concerned with is being prejudiced against these British people who went, we don't quite know about. That is exactly the point. We don't know. So it is important that these people get a fair hearing and possibly a fair trial if it goes that far. This is my concern. I don't like the prejudice that we seem to be having towards families who decided to live elsewhere, maybe in a different way of life, which is their right. I don't know that any of them has committed the crime, but you are correct that the longer they remain in those camps, the more they are at risk for their lives and for being perhaps brainwashed and radicalized.
And then Simon, that then goes to a difficulty, right? If these people do come back to the UK or to their respective home countries, how does a government then deal with their children, with their family members, with their wives or whomever who've lived for so long in such conditions and around such people? You require programs to be in place. I mean, there needs to be an organized fashion to do this, right? So that, again, we don't see a resurgence of the kind of ideology that ISIS follows.
Absolutely, and again, agreeing with Lily there, she's absolutely correct. The state, the actual overcrowding in the prisons within, especially the Kurdish northwestern controlled areas, it's a propellant, isn't it? It's a propellant for further radicalization. It basically says, die trying or live in these conditions. So they do need to come back at some point, and we do need to deal with this. The issue, of course, is resources, At the moment, as you know, worldwide, everyone seems to have not much money and not many resources to deal with these particular issues. So at the moment, it's much easier for the United Kingdom to say, do you know what? You've made your bed, go and lie in it. Stay there until we can decide what to do with you. And it needs to be dealt with. They need to come back here. If they are convicted here, we then have another issue, is that radicalisation in United Kingdom prisons is rife. So ISIS groups within UK and England and Wales, England Welsh prisons is growing, as is the ideology. So it's trying to get rid of this ideology, and it's proving very difficult.
All right, so then Lyal, how does one deal with it? Because this is a challenge upon a challenge, isn't it? Where it's easy to point the fingers at a government like the UK and say, listen, take these people back. But then at the same time, if it is, as Simon there says, that even within prisons currently, there's an issue of radicalization, this will add ever more pressure on that system, won't it?
Simon is correct that there is a risk of further radicalization in prison and the other concerns he raised. But none of those reasons justify, infringing the right of every person to a fair trial. It's something that Lily mentioned, and I'm glad she underscored that. So, these other issues, they have to be dealt with. They're not necessarily, I wouldn't want to underestimate them. But it means, some prison reform and some de-radicalization programs and comprehensive reintegration into communities, rehabilitation where that's possible, to the extent possible. That's what, human rights is all about. And so if the government just wants to say, well, we're going to leave people, our nationals, dying in these terrible camps, regardless of whether they may be guilty or not.
Lyal, I just wanted to ask you, I'm going to take a bit of extra time program, just under a minute if you can, Lyal, as a final thought. What of the human rights of people living in the UK right now and their genuine concerns about any ISIS fighters or alleged ISIS fighters coming into the country? Obviously national security and being able to live in peace in your own home and knowing that you'll be safe on the streets, that's also a human right. So how does one balance this almost catch-22 situation?
It's not really a catch-22 situation. It is. You're correct to say that everybody has a right to life. Everybody has a right to live in peace and security. But that is a separate problem of counterterrorism. And that doesn't mean that we just level broad allegations and lift the right to the presumption of innocence without a fair trial. So I would just close with that comment, is that there's a big difference between an alleged criminal and a convicted criminal.
All right, and that's a good point to end on. But of course, I'll appreciate all guests who have joined us today for this discussion. Simon, Lily, and Lyal, we appreciate your insight and, of course, putting into context all the many facets and issues surrounding this. Viewers, the issue of ISIS repatriation has been a long-standing one ever since, of course, that issue, as I said in my introduction, of ISIS brides came up, Shamima Begum specifically, we remember, and her plea to come back to the UK, even though she doesn't really regret necessarily going to Syria/Iraq to be part of ISIS, although at some level she may. How does one hold such people to account for their ideology, for traveling to Syria or otherwise to Iraq even, to be part of ISIS or to at least help ISIS in some way? And what of those fighters who've actually fought? How does one prove that they were fighters? How does one find the evidence? What will the trial look like? How would you de-radicalize their family members, their children who have only really known life in camps, squalid camps, with other, again, ISIS family members who probably only have the same kind of ideology around them as well? How does the world really deal with this in a fashion where, again, you're not ignoring the rights of your own nationals abroad and you're also taking care of national security at home? Complicated issues, certainly, and certainly revisiting many countries' foreign policies in these regards would certainly play a huge regard also. I'll be back, though, with my next segment after this break. Stay tuned.